The crystal palace stretched high into the purple sky of the Zephyrian homeworld. Inside the grand throne room, Empress Vexthara sat on her gleaming seat of power. Her body was tall and made of living crystal that caught the light from 1,000 different angles. Around her, other Zephyrians stood in perfect rows, their crystalline forms shimmering like living diamonds. The massive doors at the far end of the hall opened with a deep rumble. Captain Jake Morrison walked in first, his blue uniform neat and clean. Behind him came Ambassador Lisa Carter, a woman with gray hair and kind eyes. Colonel Ryan Burke followed last, his military bearing clear in every step. The three humans looked very small in the huge throne room. Their soft flesh and simple clothes seemed out of place among all the crystal and light. The Zephyrians watched, them with cold, glittering eyes that showed no warmth or welcome. Jake stopped at the proper distance from the throne and gave a respectful bow. "Your Imperial Majesty," he said in a clear voice, "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Fleet. We come seeking peace and friendship between our peoples." The Empress looked down at the humans for a long moment. Her crystalline face showed no emotion at first. Then, slowly, her mouth began to curve upward. A sound started deep in her throat, a musical, tinkling sound that grew louder and louder. She was laughing. The sound filled the entire throne room, echoing off the crystal walls like 1,000 wind chimes in a storm. The other Zephyrians joined in, their laughter mixing with hers to create a symphony of mockery. "Primitive mammals," the Empress said when her laughter finally died down. Her voice was like music, but cold and sharp. "You dare to stand before the Zephyrian Empire and speak of friendship? You who have barely crawled from your little blue world." Lisa stepped forward, her diplomatic training keeping her voice steady. "Your Majesty, humanity has much to offer. Our scientists have made great advances in—" "Silence," the Empress snapped. Her crystal hand waved dismissively. "I know all about your pathetic species. 3 small colonies, a handful of outdated ships. You control less space than my personal hunting grounds." The Zephyrians around the throne room whispered among themselves, their voices like breaking glass. Jake could hear words like weak and foolish and insects in their alien tongue. Colonel Burke's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Years of military discipline kept him silent, even as anger burned in his chest. The Empress stood up from her throne. She was nearly 3 meters tall, her crystal body catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. "Do you know how many worlds bow before the Zephyrian Empire?" she asked, her voice echoing through the hall. The humans remained silent. 147, she continued. 147 worlds with billions of subjects. Fleets that stretch across star systems. Technology that could turn your little Earth into cosmic dust with a single command. She walked down the crystal steps, her footsteps ringing like bells. "And you? You come here with your soft skin and your primitive ships, thinking you can stand as equals with the Zephyrian Empire?" The laughter started again, but this time it was crueler. The Empress's court joined in, their voices rising in a chorus of scorn. "Your entire species," the Empress said, her voice cutting through the laughter, "is nothing more than an amusing curiosity. Like insects that have learned to make simple tools." Jake felt his hands clench into fists at his sides. But he kept his voice level when he spoke. "Your Majesty, we came here in good faith. We hope to build something together for both our peoples." "Together?" The Empress laughed again. "What could you possibly offer the Zephyrian Empire? Your quaint little ships? Your handful of colonies? Your primitive technology?" She circled the 3 humans like a predator studying prey. "I have seen the reports. Earth has 1 moon, 3 small colonies on dead rocks, A few dozen ships that would be scrap metal against our smallest patrol craft. Lisa tried again. Your Majesty, if you would just consider— I have considered. The Empress interrupted, and I have decided. You have 30 standard galactic days. The throne room fell silent. Even the whispers of the court stopped. 30 days to do what, Your Majesty? Jake asked. The Empress smiled, and it was not a kind expression. 30 days to evacuate your colonies and return to your little blue world, all of you. Every human in space must return to Earth and stay there. The silence stretched on. Jake felt his heart pounding in his chest. And if we refuse? Then the Zephyrian fleet will ensure compliance, the Empress said simply. We will remove the infestation from space, permanently. The threat hung in the air like a sword. Jake looked at Lisa, then at Ryan. He could see the same thought in their eyes. They had failed. The mission was over. You see, the Empress continued, walking back to her throne, this is what happens when children play with adult toys. Someone gets hurt. I am being merciful by giving you time to run home. She sat back down, her crystal form settling into the throne with a musical chime. The audience is over. Return to your pathetic little ship and carry my message to your leaders. 30 days, not one more. The three humans stood there for a moment, unsure what to do. Then Jake straightened his shoulders and gave another formal bow. We understand, Your Majesty. As they turned to leave, the Empress called out one last time. Oh, and Captain Morrison, when you return to Earth, be sure to tell your people exactly what you saw here today. Tell them about the power of the Zephyrian Empire. Tell them how their representatives stood before me and begged for mercy. The laughter started again as the humans walked toward the great doors. It followed them all the way out of the throne room, down the crystal corridors, and into their small shuttle. Jake said nothing as they lifted off from the Zephyrian homeworld. Lisa stared out the window at the massive crystal cities below. Ryan checked and rechecked his weapon, as if expecting an attack at any moment. But as their ship jumped into hyperspace, heading back toward Earth, there was something the Empress had not seen. In Jake's eyes, there was no fear, no despair. Instead, there was something much more dangerous. There was a quiet, burning determination. The Empress had made her first mistake. She had underestimated humanity. It would be her last. The war room beneath Geneva was a place few humans had ever seen. Deep underground, protected by layers of steel and concrete, it was where Earth's most important decisions were made. The walls were lined with screens showing star maps, ship positions, and classified data that would shock the galaxy. President Helen Brooks sat at the head of the long metal table. Her face was tired but determined. Around her sat the most powerful people in human space, generals, admirals, scientists, and spies who had spent decades preparing for this moment. The mission failed, Jake Morrison said, his voice flat. He stood before the council, still wearing his diplomatic uniform. The Empress gave us 30 days to evacuate all human colonies and return to Earth. And if we refuse? Asked General Marcus Stone. He was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands from old battles. She'll wipe us out, Jake replied. The entire Zephyrian fleet will attack our colonies. She thinks we're too weak to fight back. President Brooks nodded slowly. Then it's time to show her how wrong she is. She pressed a button on the table. The lights dimmed and a massive holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed a three-dimensional map of local space with hundreds of glowing dots scattered across dozens of star systems. Ladies and gentlemen, the president said, meet the real human empire. The room was silent as everyone stared at the display. The map showed far more than 3 small colonies. There were dots everywhere, hidden bases, secret shipyards, and established settlements spread across 50 different star systems. Admiral Susan Hayes stood up from her chair. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. For the past 40 years, we've been building in secret. Every time we sent out an exploration mission or a scientific expedition, we were really establishing new colonies. She walked to the holographic display and pointed to a cluster of dots. These are the mining worlds, 17 asteroid bases where we've been harvesting rare metals. The Zephyrians don't even know they exist. Her finger moved to another section. These are the research stations, hidden laboratories where our best scientists have been developing new technologies. We've made advances the Zephyrians can't even imagine. General Stone activated another part of the display. Suddenly, the room was filled with images of massive ships, each 1 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and armor. Project Shadowfall, he said quietly. 200 supercarriers, each one larger than anything in the Zephyrian fleet. They've been under construction for 20 years, hidden in remote nebulae and asteroid fields. Dr. Kevin Walsh, the head of human engineering, stepped forward. He was a thin man with wild hair and excited eyes. Each supercarrier is equipped with quantum jump drives that can move them instantly across space. Their armor is made from adaptive metals that can repair themselves. Their weapons can punch through any known defense. But the best part, Admiral Hayes added with a smile, is that they're completely invisible to Zephyrian sensors. We've been studying alien technology for decades, combining it with our own innovations. Our ships can hide in plain sight. Commander Beth Taylor, the head of human intelligence, activated her own display. Images of aliens appeared, Zephyrians going about their daily lives, completely unaware they were being watched. We have agents throughout Zephyrian space, she said. Humans who have been living among them for years, gathering information. We know their military strength, their patrol routes, their weaknesses. She pointed to one image, a Zephyrian military base. This is their main fleet command center. Our agent there has been feeding us tactical data for 3 years. The Zephyrians have no idea we exist in their space. President Brooks stood up. The Empress thinks she's dealing with a primitive species that has 3 small colonies and a few old ships. She has no idea that we've been preparing for this moment for 40 years. General Stone brought up another display, this one showing the Zephyrian homeworld surrounded by defense platforms and patrol ships. Their defenses are impressive, but they're designed to stop conventional attacks. They're not prepared for ships that can appear from nowhere. The plan is simple, Admiral Hayes said. We position all 200 supercarriers around the Zephyrian homeworld. When the 30-day deadline arrives, we decloak simultaneously. The psychological impact will be devastating. Dr. Walsh nodded enthusiastically. Imagine it. The Empress is standing on her palace balcony, confident in her victory. Suddenly, the stars disappear as 200 massive human warships materialize out of empty space. The Zephyrians will realize they've been completely outmaneuvered, Commander Taylor added. Their intelligence networks failed them. Their technology is inferior. Their arrogance has made them blind. Jake Morrison, who had been silent during the presentation, finally spoke. Are we really going to do this? Are we going to reveal everything? President Brooks looked at him seriously. Jake, the Empress gave us no choice. She demanded that we abandon space and return to Earth like beaten dogs. She threatened to exterminate us if we refused. But we could try diplomacy again, Jake said. Maybe if we revealed just some of our capabilities. No, General Stone interrupted. The time for half measures is over. The Empress needs to understand that humanity is not weak. We're not primitive. And we're certainly not going to be pushed around. Admiral Hayes activated the final display. It showed the deployment plan. how the 200 supercarriers would move through space, using their stealth technology to avoid detection. The operation will take 28 days, she said. We'll use the quantum jump drives to move the fleet in small groups, positioning them throughout the Zephyrian system. By the time the deadline arrives, we'll have the entire homeworld surrounded. What about the Zephyrian fleet? Asked Colonel Burke, who had remained silent until now. They'll be helpless, Commander Taylor replied. Our ships are faster, better armed, and completely invisible to their sensors. If they try to fight, they'll be destroyed before they can even find us. President Brooks walked to the star map and looked at the glowing dots that represented humanity's secret empire. For too long, we've hidden in the shadows. We've let other species think we're weak and primitive. But the Empress has forced our hand. She turned back to the Council. In 30 days, the galaxy will learn the truth about humanity. We're not the helpless mammals they think we are. We're the most dangerous species in space. Dangerous because we're patient, because we're clever, and because we never give up. General. Stone activated a communication system. All fleet commanders are to report to their stations immediately. Operation Shadowfall is a go. As the meeting ended, Jake Morrison stood by the star map, staring at the hundreds of hidden human settlements. He thought about the Empress's laughter, her cruel words, her threats. She has no idea what's coming, he said quietly. Admiral Hayes joined him at the display. The Empress laughed at us, Jake. She called us primitive mammals. She threatened to wipe us out. She pointed to the image of the Zephyrian homeworld. In 28 days, we'll see who's laughing. The room began to empty as the council members rushed to their duties. The greatest military operation in human history was about to begin. The Empress had demanded that humanity return to Earth and stay there. Instead, she was about to learn that humans were already everywhere, watching, waiting, and preparing to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. The countdown had begun. Fleet Admiral Tony Clark stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the final preparations for Operation Shadowfall. The massive supercarrier stretched out before him through the viewports, 5 kilometers of advanced human engineering, hidden in the depths of the Horsehead Nebula. Around him, his bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. They had trained for this moment for years, but none of them had imagined it would come so soon. The Empress's ultimatum had forced their hand, but they were ready. Sir, called Lieutenant Commander Nancy Wright from the communications station. All fleet groups report ready for jump. Tony nodded. 200 supercarriers, each one carrying thousands of fighters and crew members, were about to begin the most daring military operation in human history. They would move through space, like ghosts, invisible to Zephyrian sensors, positioning themselves around the enemy homeworld. Begin Phase 1, Tony ordered. Groups Alpha through Delta, commence quantum jump. On the tactical display, 40 dots representing human supercarriers suddenly vanished. They had jumped to predetermined coordinates throughout Zephyrian space, using routes mapped out by human intelligence agents over many years. Captain Sam Rodriguez was leading the first wave aboard the USS Vengeance. As his ship materialized in the outer edge of the Zephyrian system, he held his breath. The stealth systems were perfect. His massive warship was completely invisible to the alien sensors. Status report, Sam whispered to his crew. Stealth systems, operating at full efficiency, reported his science officer. No signs of detection. Zephyrian patrol ship passing 2 kilometers to starboard. They can't see us, Sam smiled. Years of research and development had paid off. The human ships could hide in plain sight, even this close to enemy territory. Meanwhile, on the Zephyrian homeworld, Empress Vixthara was enjoying her victory. She stood in her crystal garden, surrounded by her court, discussing the upcoming elimination of the human pest. Have there been any signs of resistance? Asked General Kleckstar, her military advisor. His crystalline form was darker than the others, marked with scars from old battles. None, the Empress replied, her voice musical with satisfaction. The pathetic humans are evacuating their colonies as ordered. Our sensors show increased ship traffic around their settlements. They're running home like frightened children. What she didn't know was that the increased traffic was actually human supply ships, loading the last of the equipment and personnel before the colonies were abandoned. But these weren't evacuations. They were strategic withdrawals, clearing the way for the coming operation. General Kleckstar studied a tactical report. My lady, our intelligence on human capabilities is limited. Perhaps we should investigate further before. Investigate what? The Empress laughed. We know everything about them. 3 small colonies, a handful of obsolete ships, primitive technology. What more is there to learn? Hidden among the crystalline servants in the garden was Agent Greg Foster. He looked like a Zephyrian thanks to advanced human disguise technology, but his human eyes missed nothing. He memorized every detail of the palace defenses, every routine of the guards, every weakness in their security. That night, Greg transmitted his report to the human fleet. The message was encoded in a way that looked like random cosmic radiation to Zephyrian sensors, but human computers could decode it perfectly. Palace defenses are concentrated on the eastern approach, his message read. Empress maintains daily routine, public appearances from the sky balcony at 08:00 local time. Recommended positioning for maximum psychological impact. Back in space, the human fleet continued its careful advance. Captain Amy Brooks commanded the USS Thunderbolt, one of the ships assigned to map the inner system defenses. Take us closer to the defense platforms, she ordered. We need detailed scans of their weapon systems. Her navigator, a young man named Pete Kelly, looked nervous. Ma'am, we'll be within their sensor range. Trust the stealth systems, Pete, Amy said calmly. We're invisible to them. The Thunderbolt drifted past a massive Zephyrian defense platform. The alien structure was covered in weapons and sensor arrays, but none of them detected the human warship passing just kilometers away. Weapons scan complete, reported the tactical officer. Their plasma cannons are powerful, but they have blind spots. Uploading data to Fleet Command. All across the Zephyrian system, human ships were gathering information. They mapped every defense platform, every patrol route, every weak point in the alien defenses. The Zephyrians had no idea they were being studied like specimens under a microscope. Dr. Phil Martinez, the fleet's chief scientist, was making final adjustments to the Revelation Protocol aboard the USS Defiance. He was a small man with thick glasses and steady hands, and he held the key to the operation's success. The simultaneous decloak will create a massive subspace pulse, he explained to Admiral Clark. Every sensor in the system will detect it at the same time. The Zephyrians will see all 200 ships appear at once. What about the psychological impact? Tony asked. Phil smiled. Imagine you're looking at a clear night sky, and suddenly, it's filled with massive alien warships. The human brain would be overwhelmed, and Zephyrian psychology isn't that different from ours. They'll be paralyzed with shock. As the days passed, more human ships moved into position. The operation was a masterpiece of coordination. Ships jumped in small groups, used different routes, and positioned themselves at carefully calculated points around the Zephyrian homeworld. Captain Dan Williams commanded the USS Retribution, positioned near the planet's northern pole. His ship was one of the closest to the surface, close enough to launch fighters if needed. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving signals from Agent Foster. The Empress is planning a victory celebration for tomorrow. Dan read the decoded message. She's invited representatives from other alien species to witness the end of the human threat. Perfect. They'll all see what happens when you underestimate humanity. Throughout the fleet, the final preparations were being made. Weapon systems were charged, fighters were fueled, and crew members checked their equipment one last time. But this wasn't preparation for battle. It was preparation for the greatest military demonstration in galactic history. Commander Lisa Foster, the fleet's communications coordinator, was setting up the transmission equipment that would broadcast Admiral Clark's message to the Zephyrian homeworld. The message would be sent on all frequencies, ensuring that every being in the system would hear it. "Test the signal penetration," Lisa ordered. "We need to make sure it reaches every corner of the planet." The technician nodded. "Signal strength is at maximum. Even their most shielded facilities will receive it." As the countdown entered its final hours, the human fleet was perfectly positioned. 200 supercarriers surrounded the Zephyrian homeworld like an invisible net. Each ship was loaded with fighters, weapons, and crew members who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The Zephyrians still had no idea what was coming. Their sensors showed empty space where human warships actually floated. Their intelligence networks had detected no unusual activity. They were completely unprepared for what was about to happen. On the bridge of the USS Defiance, Admiral Clark watched the final countdown. In just a few hours, the 30-day deadline would arrive. The Empress expected to see human ships fleeing back to Earth in defeat. Instead, she was about to learn that humans had been surrounding her homeworld for weeks. "All ships report ready," Nancy Wright announced. "We're in position." Tony nodded. "Send the message to all fleet commanders. In 6 hours, we show the galaxy what humanity is really capable of." The trap was set. The fleet was ready. The Empress, who had laughed at humanity, was about to receive the shock of her life. The gathering storm was about to break. The morning sun rose over the crystal spires of the Zephyrian homeworld, casting rainbow patterns across the palace walls. Empress Vexthara stood on her favorite balcony, the sky balcony, looking up at the clear purple sky with deep satisfaction. Today was the day. The 30-day deadline had arrived, and the pathetic humans had done exactly what she expected. They had fled back to their little blue world like the cowards they were. "My lady," General Klexstar approached from behind, his crystalline form reflecting the morning light. "The final reports are in. Human activity in their colonies has ceased. Our long-range sensors detect no ships in the outer system." The Empress smiled, her crystal lips curving upward. "Of course not. I told you. They were weak. Primitive mammals who crumble at the first sign of real power." Around the balcony, her court gathered to witness this moment of triumph. Representatives from other alien species had been invited to watch. The Nexari, with their blue skin and silver eyes, the Corvani, with their insect-like appearance, and others who had once ignored the Zephyrian Empire's demands. "Let this be a lesson to all who dare challenge us," the Empress announced to her guests. "This is what happens to those who overestimate their own importance." High above them, invisible to all sensors, Admiral Tony Clark stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance. A massive supercarrier floated in perfect silence, its stealth systems hiding it from every detection method the Zephyrians possessed. "Time to deadline?" Tony asked quietly. 30 seconds, sir," reported Lieutenant Commander Nancy Wright. Tony activated the fleet-wide communication system. His voice would reach all 200 human supercarriers simultaneously, carried by quantum transmissions that no alien technology could intercept. "All ships, this is Admiral Clark." The Empress thought she could threaten humanity and force us to bow down. She thought we were weak, primitive, and helpless. He paused, looking out at the purple sky of the alien world below. She was wrong. Execute Shadowfall. At exactly 0800 Galactic Standard Time, something impossible happened. the clear sky above. The Zephyrian homeworld began to change. What had been empty space suddenly filled with shadows massive, dark shapes that blocked out the stars themselves. The first ship to decloak was the USS Vengeance, commanded by Captain Sam Rodriguez. The massive supercarrier materialized directly above the palace, its 5-kilometer length casting a shadow across the entire city below. But it wasn't alone. One by one, like giants awakening from a dream, 200 human supercarriers became visible. They appeared from every direction, above, below, and all around the planet. Each ship was massive beyond imagination, bristling with weapons and swarming with fighter craft. The Empress's laugh died in her throat as she looked up at the sky. Where moments before there had been clear purple heavens, now there was only darkness. The human ships had arranged themselves in perfect formation, their combined mass creating an eclipse that turned day into night. "Impossible," she whispered, her crystal form trembling. The alien representatives on the balcony stood frozen in shock. The Nexari ambassador's silver eyes were wide with disbelief. The Corvani delegate's insect-like limbs clicked nervously as he stared at the impossible sight. On the surface of the planet, panic began to spread. Zephyrian citizens looked up at the darkened sky and saw their worst nightmare. An invasion fleet of unimaginable size that had appeared from nowhere. Captain Dan Williams, commanding the USS Retribution, was positioned directly over the planet's capital city. His ship was one of the closest to the surface, and he could see the crystal buildings below reflecting the light from his vessel's hull. "Launch fighters," he ordered. "Full deployment." From the massive hangar bays of the USS Retribution, hundreds of human fighters poured out like a swarm of angry insects. Each fighter was sleek, fast, and deadly, far more advanced than anything the Zephyrians had ever seen. Across the planet, the same thing was happening. Every human supercarrier was launching its fighters, creating a glittering cloud of death that surrounded the entire world. The sky filled with thousands of small craft, each one a testament to human engineering and determination. The Zephyrian defense platforms, which had seemed so powerful just moments before, now looked like toys compared to the human fleet. There, plasma cannons pointed helplessly at targets too numerous to count, their sensors overwhelmed by the sheer number of contacts. Commander Lisa Foster, aboard the flagship USS Defiance, opened a communication channel to the planet below. The transmission cut through all Zephyrian networks, overriding their security systems with ease. "This is Admiral Tony Clark of the United Earth Fleet." His voice echoed across the planet, reaching every corner of the world. "Empress Vexthara, you seem to have underestimated the primitive mammals from Earth." The Empress stood on her balcony, surrounded by her panicking court, staring up at the darkened sky. Her entire worldview had been shattered in a single moment. The weak humans she had mocked were surrounding her homeworld with a fleet that dwarfed her entire empire. "You laughed at us," Admiral Clark's voice continued. "You called us weak. You threatened to wipe us out. You gave us 30 days to run back to Earth like beaten dogs." Above the planet, the human fighters continued their deployment. They moved in perfect formation, creating patterns of light against the dark hulls of the supercarriers. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "But we didn't run. The Admiral's voice was calm, but firm. "We've been here for weeks, watching you, studying you, preparing for this moment. Your sensors couldn't detect us. Your intelligence networks failed you. Your arrogance made you blind. General Kleckstar tried to activate the planetary defense systems, but his hands shook so badly he could barely operate the controls. The Zephyrian military had trained for many scenarios, but not this. Not for an enemy that could appear from nowhere with overwhelming force. "My lady," he whispered to the Empress, "what are your orders?" The Empress couldn't answer. She was frozen, staring at the impossible sight above her. The stars had literally been blotted out by human warships. The sky belonged to humanity now. Captain Amy Brooks, commanding the USS Thunderbolt, watched the Zephyrian fleet trying to respond. Their ships were launching from orbital stations, but they moved slowly, confused by the sudden appearance of the human fleet. "Sir," her tactical officer reported, "Zephyrian ships are attempting to form a defensive line." Amy almost felt sorry for them. Let them try. They can't fight what they can't understand. The human fleet didn't move to attack. They didn't need to. Their mere presence was enough to paralyze the entire Zephyrian military. The psychological impact was overwhelming. A clear sky that had suddenly filled with enemy warships was beyond anything the aliens could comprehend. "We accept your surrender," Admiral Clark's voice concluded. The simple words echoed across the planet, heard by every Zephyrian citizen, every government official, every military commander. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the panic in the streets below seemed to pause as the reality of the situation sank in. The Empress, the proud ruler of 147 worlds, stood on her balcony and looked up at the human fleet. 200 supercarriers floated above her world, like sleeping giants, each one carrying enough firepower to level a continent. But they weren't attacking. They were waiting. The message was clear. Humanity had the power to destroy the Zephyrian homeworld completely, but they chose not to. They were offering mercy to those who had shown them none. Slowly, with movements that seemed to take forever, the Empress raised her crystalline hand. It was a gesture of surrender, visible to the human ships above and broadcast across the planet. The war was over before it had even begun. The Empress, who had laughed at humanity, now stood in the shadow of their fleet, her laughter replaced by stunned silence. The stars had gone dark, blocked out by human ships that had appeared from nowhere. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. 3 days after the Great Revelation, the crystal throne room of the Zephyrian Empire looked very different. The arrogant laughter was gone, replaced by quiet conversations and nervous whispers. The Empress sat on her throne, but her crystalline form seemed smaller somehow, as if the weight of her mistake had physically diminished her. Ambassador Mike Thompson walked into the hall with steady steps. Unlike the previous human delegation, he was not here to beg for peace. He was here to dictate terms from a position of absolute strength. Behind him came a small group of human officials, each one representing a different aspect of the new relationship between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire. They moved with quiet confidence, knowing that 200 human supercarriers still surrounded the planet above. "Your Imperial Majesty," Mike said with a respectful but not subservient bow. "I am Ambassador Mike Thompson, representing the United Earth Federation. I believe we have much to discuss." The Empress looked at him with eyes that held none of their previous mockery. "Ambassador Thompson," she said, her musical voice subdued, "please speak freely." Mike activated a holographic display that showed the terms of surrender. The document was fair but firm, designed to prevent future conflicts while establishing humanity as a major galactic power. "The Zephyrian Empire will immediately cease all military expansion," he began. "All aggressive actions against other species will stop. Your fleets will withdraw to defensive positions around your core worlds." The Empress nodded slowly. She had no choice but to agree. "Second, all human territorial claims will be recognized and respected. Our colonies, our trade routes, our exploration rights, all will be acknowledged by the Zephyrian government." General Kleckstar stepped forward. "Ambassador, what about our existing territories? Our established colonies? They remain yours." Mike replied, "We're not conquerors. We're establishing a new framework for coexistence." The third term was the most important. The Zephyrian Empire will join the Galactic Peace Council, along with other major species. This council will mediate disputes and prevent future conflicts through diplomacy rather than force. As the negotiations continued, news of humanity's demonstration was spreading throughout the galaxy. The revelation of the human fleet had sent shockwaves through every alien civilization. On the water world of Aquatica, the Nexari Council was holding an emergency session. The blue-skinned aliens who had previously ignored human diplomatic messages were now desperately trying to establish contact with Earth. "We must send ambassadors immediately," declared Council Leader Zixara, her silver eyes reflecting the concern of her entire species. If the humans can hide 200 supercarriers from Zephyrian sensors, what else are they capable of? Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. The insect-like Corvani were abandoning their isolation policies. The gas-dwelling ethereals were offering to share their advanced technologies. Species that had never even acknowledged humanity's existence were suddenly very interested in becoming friends. Back on the Zephyrian homeworld, Captain Sarah Collins of the USS Horizon was preparing for a very different kind of diplomatic mission. The Horizon was the same class of ship that had originally carried the failed human delegation, but now it arrived with full military honors. "Docking Bay 7 is prepared for your arrival," came the transmission from Zephyrian traffic control. The alien controller's voice was respectful, almost nervous. Sarah smiled as she guided her ship into the crystal docking facility. Just weeks ago, humans had been mocked and dismissed. Now they were being treated as honored guests by the same people who had laughed at them. The Empress herself was waiting in the docking bay when Sarah disembarked. It was an unprecedented honor, the ruler of 147 worlds personally greeting a human captain. "Captain Collins," the Empress said, her crystalline form bowing deeply. "Welcome to our world. I hope your stay will be more pleasant than your predecessor's visit." Sarah noticed the choice of words. The Empress was acknowledging her previous mistake without directly apologizing. It was a start. "Your Majesty," Sarah replied with appropriate diplomatic courtesy, "I'm here to discuss the establishment of our first joint research facility." The research facility was part of the new agreement. Human and Zephyrian scientists would work together, sharing technologies and knowledge for the benefit of both species. It was a symbol of the new relationship between their peoples. Dr. Kevin Walsh had arrived a day earlier to begin setting up the facility. The brilliant human engineer was amazed by Zephyrian crystal growing technology, while the alien scientists were fascinated by human adaptive materials. "Their quantum resonance methods are incredible," Kevin reported to Earth via secure transmission. "Combined with our stealth technology, we could develop even better cloaking systems." Meanwhile, General Marcus Stone was overseeing the establishment of the first human military base in Zephyrian space. The base was located on a small moon, positioned to monitor the surrounding star systems without being threatening. "This isn't about conquest," Marcus explained to his officers. "It's about maintaining peace. Our presence here reminds everyone that humanity is watching." The psychological impact of the base was enormous. Every species in the region knew that human ships were nearby, ready to respond to any crisis. It was a powerful deterrent to future conflicts. Admiral Susan Hayes was coordinating the gradual reduction of the fleet around the Zephyrian homeworld. The 200 supercarriers couldn't stay forever. They were needed elsewhere to patrol humanity's expanded territory. "Maintain 30 ships in the system," she ordered. "That's enough to remind them of our capabilities without seeming oppressive." As the weeks passed, the changes in galactic politics became more apparent. The Galactic Peace Council held its first meeting in a neutral space station, with representatives from dozens of species. Ambassador Lisa Carter, who had been part of the original humiliated delegation, now sat at the head table as humanity's chief representative. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had gone from being mocked to being one of the most important diplomats in the galaxy. The age of military expansion is over, she declared to the assembled representatives. From now on, disputes will be settled through negotiation, not conquest. The other species listened carefully. They had all seen what happened when humanity was pushed too far. None of them wanted to make the same mistake the Empress had made. On Earth, President Helen Brooks was addressing the United Nations Assembly. The revelation of humanity's secret empire had shocked even Earth's own population. For 40 years, we prepared in secret, she explained. We knew that one day we would face a test like this. We chose to be ready rather than sorry. The crowd erupted in applause. Humanity had proven itself on the galactic stage and Earth's. Citizens were proud of their species' achievement. Back on the Zephyrian homeworld, the Empress was making her own address to her people. The crystal beings gathered in the great plaza below the palace, looking up at their ruler with new understanding. We have learned a valuable lesson, the Empress said, her voice carrying across the plaza. Strength is not measured only by what you can see. The humans taught us that wisdom and patience can be more powerful than fleets and weapons. She paused, looking up at the sky where human ships still patrolled. They could have destroyed us. She continued, they had the power to turn our world to dust. But they chose mercy instead. They offered us partnership instead of conquest. We have much to learn from them. Agent Greg Foster, still disguised among the Zephyrians, smiled as he listened to the speech. His mission was complete, not just the intelligence gathering, but the larger goal of changing hearts and minds. That evening, Admiral Tony Clark stood on the observation deck of the USS Defiance, looking down at the crystal cities of the Zephyrian homeworld. The lights were beautiful, creating patterns that no human artist could match. Sir, Commander Nancy Wright approached with a datapad. Message from Earth Command. They're asking when we can return home. Tony considered the question. Send a reply. Tell them we're not just returning home. We're already there. The galaxy is humanity's home now. He thought about the Empress's laughter, so confident and cruel just a month ago. That laughter had awakened something in humanity, not anger, but determination. The determination to prove that they were more than anyone imagined. You know what? The best part is, Nancy? Tony said quietly. What's that, sir? We never fired a single shot. We won the entire war without killing anyone. We proved our point through strength, but we kept our humanity through mercy. The stars were visible again above the Zephyrian homeworld. Most of the human fleet had departed, leaving only enough ships to maintain the peace. But the galaxy would never forget the day when 200 supercarriers had obscured the stars. The Empress, who had laughed at humanity, now stood as one of Earth's strongest advocates in the Galactic Council. She had learned that underestimating others was the most dangerous mistake a leader could make. And throughout the galaxy, in council chambers and military headquarters, in research facilities and trading posts, the same lesson was being learned. Over and over again, humanity had been patient when others were aggressive. They had been wise when others were foolish. They had been merciful when others would have been vengeful. The galaxy would never you.